to order. Our practice is to take the consent agenda first, and so I want to check and see if council members have anything on consent that they'd like pulled.
C1C.
C1C, okay, yeah. And
C3.
C3. Okay, and then I'd like to pull C4, just for a comment on that. Anybody else have any of these items that they want pulled, particularly the demolition items? Is anyone here to speak about something on the demolition list? No, okay. So except for C1, C3, and C4, may I have a motion?
Move for approval of the balance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Let me go ahead and get C4 first. Well, that's
Consideration of items relating to the Transforming Urban Residential Neighborhoods Programming. This item was continued from the August meetings of the Finance and Community Development, Housing and General Government Committees.
the reason I pulled this is that Finance Committee yesterday made some changes to what we have in front of us, and I can't remember all the changes. I know one was the tenant income, but if you would give us a little brief.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, a presentation was made to the Finance Committee yesterday. I believe it went fairly favorably. There were 3 issues, as I recall, that there was concern about. One had to do with the rents that were being charged to tenants, because currently the way the program is, it would be capped off at 80%, and we were asked to look at some provision that would allow rents to be charged for individuals above 80%. Another issue had to do with verifying the tenant eligibility, and what would happen where you had tenants that were eligible and their rent began to increase, and how that would be handled. So
Their
that was,
income.
their income.
Yeah.
Right, that was another. And the third, I believe, was that it? Yeah, it was just those 2. It was just those 2.
Okay.
So we will be looking at that and having something ready for you to review very shortly.
The third had to do with the cycle by which they do the inspection of the property. There was some concern that there might not be enough time to inspect annually.
Correct. That was the third one.
We'll have all that by
We'll
Monday.
be responsible to all 3 of those issues in your third pass.
Okay. Mr. City Manager, should we just wait until it comes back to vote on this, or could we vote on it with the provisions that these changes be made?
Chairman, as I understand, the Finance Committee sent it on to full council,
Okay.
and I think 3-1, if I remember right. And we said we'd have that information Monday night, so probably this committee should send it on as well.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to do so? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Just in reference to the second item you mentioned in terms of rent charge, I don't think it was about the rent charge, but in the sense of the individuals being able to access the housing for those individuals above 80%. Because I heard the way you said it in terms of the charging.
The landlord's being restricted. Landlord's not being restricted to renting to folks 80%.
Right.
Okay.
The other issue was how often you check the income for those who are renting. And I think because to do it every year, we check every year, and I think
We decided no.
decided not to do
Right.
that.
Just
Correct.
one time unless the tenant changes.
Exactly.
Right. And on that note, in terms of the actual ability for individuals to rent to individuals above the 80% AMI. I know finance sent without my support, which hurt me, but I would ask in that same sense that this committee would consider that in what was sent forward in the light of moving forward with this, and as finance committee has moved something forward, but take that into consideration in terms of what's sent forward.
Yeah, I think so. Do you want to, for us to suggest an AMI that would be appropriate? Because I know that chart we had yesterday went up to 200% of the median income. Would you make that suggestion, or?
Question. Councilmember, what is it, and Chair, what is it specifically are you asking? I thought that we would forward it to council Monday, just as we did in finance yesterday, with the added changes coming to make the amendments to the motion when we get there Monday night.
I understand that item, but for me, if it's something that comes forward Monday night that is not sufficient, it won't be something that will probably go forward on Monday. So my suggestion would be that we actually have some suggestion prior to that time in terms of getting something for people to actually review in great detail prior to that, because if we get to a meeting on Monday night and we're having a full-fledged discussion on it at that time, I don't see.
Mr. Brooks,
I don't know that I've got enough information. I mean, you're asking for that vote now before we have the information to vote on, so I'm not comfortable endorsing that without seeing what our options are, what's recommended by staff.
Several options.
Committee members, we started discussing this last night and had other conversation about it today, and I believe we'll be prepared to have something to go out in the packet Thursday for you to review.
all right, you're okay with that?
It doesn't matter because y'all gonna be the ones to vote on it. I dissented in finance because I thought it was not, we should have something firmer going to full council than making the final decision at full council. So,
Madam Chair, I move that we accept item C4 to go forward to full council on Monday with the added changes that will come to us in the packet.
Okay with that?
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good, thank you. Let's go ahead and, talk about C1C. I know there are people from the neighborhood here who, want to talk about this too, so, that's.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
911 Walnut Street. The complaint notice appearing on this property was issued in June of 2014, and service was obtained by certified mail on June 19th of 2014. We held a hearing on July 14th of 2014 and issued a repair order. Said order expired on August 29th of 2014, and since November 20th of 2014, the property has been vacant and closed. It became eligible for the 6-month vacancy demolition consideration in May of 2014. The estimated cost to repair the structure is $12,712, and the fair market value of the structure is $63,814.
Thank you. I have a question. I know Jeff may have some too, but all of the deficiencies, code deficiencies listed on this property are outside, exterior. Is that because we could not gain access to the inside?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Have we been able to contact the owner of this property at all?
In looking at the case history, Mr. Wade spoke with Tiffany Thomas, who is the office assistant, and he advised that he was going to meet with the inspector in order to better understand the violations, and that he would have them completed within 90 days of that time. And that notation was made to the case on September the 8th.
This September?
Yes, last week.
All right, okay. That's, okay. Jeff?
Do we, I just continue to be frustrated by these cases where we're taking down very high-quality historic stock in a neighborhood that is full of this kind of housing, and where if we had different tools available to us, this property could be a valuable asset. And in the condition that it's in, it's negatively affecting its neighbors. But I guess I would want to hear from the neighborhood whether they think it's worth tearing it down versus waiting for another solution, either through a sale or some other method to change ownership of the property.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah. Mr. Walters is he, the president of the West-Salem Neighborhood Association.
Yes, that's correct. The neighborhood, as you all know, over in West-Salem has a lot of historic homes. It is a historical area, and the neighborhood association is in favor of saving any homes that we possibly can. For this particular home, I've heard of some of the history established with it, and I have been in contact with 2 individuals who may be interested in purchasing this property to renovate it and save it completely. One person said they were going to contact the city. They didn't tell me who, but they know what contacts within the city to talk to about possibly purchasing this property from Mr. Wade. The other thing is, unfortunately, I do believe this is a slumlord, and he does have another piece of property over on Shover Street, which is going to be going into foreclosure pretty soon. So I do not anticipate this gentleman doing anything to fix this property up. But as an association, we would love to see this place saved.
It really, even in the deteriorated condition, it's a sweet little cottage. So certainly, I agree with the West-Salem neighborhood. Do you have any more pictures of it? That doesn't show the from the front. Are there? Yeah, cute little place. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But at any rate,
Can I ask a question of
sure.
the neighborhood
Yes,
association?
absolutely.
Gentlemen, in a lot of cases, we hear from neighbors who do not want to go through the 2-year process of eminent domain, where the city can actually purchase the property or take the property away from the owner. A lot of times it's felt like that's an undue burden on the people that surround that house. I doubt that you guys have had that conversation within the neighborhood and specifically about the neighbors that are right around there. But I wonder if if we had the buy-in from the neighborhood, would we be willing to do that?
Mr. Walters,
Just a question.
if you will.
What type of structural problems have been noticed on this house from the outside? I know that nobody's had the experience of being able to get inside.
Yeah, well, it's reglazed windows, repair foundation, safe handrails at the exits, defective siding, repair or replace. That's it, a short list, and I'm pretty sure there's more than that.
Okay, and did I hear properly that fair market value was like 53,000?
60-something.
63?
638.
Okay, even with that, somebody could purchase that property and they could put another $50,000 or $60,000 in it and have a nice home.
Yeah, yeah. But, as, we have 2 options, and as I see it at this point, either, and I've spoken to, someone in the neighborhood who has fixed up other houses, who is interested in buying it now. The problem is, how do you get hold of the owner? That's why my question to Stephanie was, have you ever spoken to him? But, so that it's either we give extra time to, allow that to happen, that, Mr. Landis perhaps get in touch with Mr. Wade, or we vote demolition and that we're going to take the house. That's not going to help the house to sit for another 2 years, because that's required.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. Rick, did you want to have something to say? Up to the, yeah. And if you'll give your name and address.
Yeah, my name is Rick Henterly. I live at 728 South Green Street. I'm a member of the board of the Winston-Salem Neighborhood Association. I live just a few blocks from the house in question. And I was going to point out, we have a neighborhood meeting the first Tuesday of October. You mentioned one of the opportunities is if we were to postpone the demolition, talk to the neighbors, that maybe we go through the process of acquiring the property or looking at some of these other options. We have that ability to kind of vet the buy-in from the rest of the neighborhood as far as coming around the house. I mean, that neighborhood is definitely beyond up and coming at this point. I mean, the neighbors there's a lot of family and community over at that part of the neighborhood. So I think that there would be a lot of focus and enthusiasm on saving the property. I mean, like you guys said, I mean, you're looking at maybe $5,000-6,000 of cosmetic work and a little more on the outside to save a historic property. That's something that the neighborhood is definitely interested in doing and has been working to do for the last 15 plus years. So if we're able to at least delay the demolition for now, I think that there would be a lot of opportunities to work with the neighborhood association, with the board, and with the other interested parties, the owner.
Could we,
Procedurally, can we offer a period of time for the owner to respond, which I think we're probably not going to see a satisfaction from, but then on the end of that, go to eminent domain process instead of demolition?
I mean, you can hold it in committee if you want to, or you can, hold it in committee for like 30 days, 90 times a week, as long as give the owner an opportunity to respond, and then it comes back as long, I guess, for consideration in terms of the eminent domain process. Now, it's looking, and it looks like it's been closed since February 2013, right? Taking closed pursuant to that order. So that 2-year period may not necessarily be far away.
June, it's been vacant since November 20th, 2014 for
so
of
it's
the
been
last
almost a
visit.
year.
Are you asking when it initially became vacant prior to that?
Pursuant to
It would have been June 17th of 2014 was the first reinspection after hearing, and it was vacant at that time.
It may not be a 14 years. Yes, you can hold it in committee, give the owner an opportunity to respond to, I guess, inquiries made within by the administration.
Right. And I would suggest that if we do go through the eminent domain process, that the property be offered to the public in a public manner versus just waiting for somebody to come up to us and approach us and say, I'll fix that house. I've done a lot of restoration work in this neighborhood. The neighborhood is extremely popular right now. Everything that comes on the market that's well priced is selling. A house just appraised, a refurbished house of a very similar time period, very similar shape and size, just appraised for almost $280,000. So this house the market will take care of this house if we can present it to the
If
market.
we can save it, yeah. Okay.
Chairman Light,
Oh,
just one point. If we go through the eminent domain process to acquire the property, the only way that we can dispose of it is to a nonprofit carrying out a public
that's right,
service.
that's right.
Neighborhood association? Nonprofit?
If they have the ability.
Generally, they're 501(c)(3), yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, Dan.
Hey, is there any downside to the order to repair or demolish? Just give a longer time period on it? Is there any, it's not mutually exclusive with a process, and we always put a hold on
Right.
the demolition. Yeah, I'd suggest that we go ahead and adopt an order, give it 6 months to the effective date, and encourage the other processes to move forward simultaneously.
Yeah. All right.
Well, what we can do, 'cause I think the order speaks for 90 days, we can just delay essentially the effective date.
6
That's
months.
what I was
Yeah.
suggesting.
Okay, if I can have a motion.
So moved. You got all that?
In a second.
What she said.
To move forward with the ordinance with the effective date 6 months from adoption.
Correct.
Okay, all right, there we go. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. We got to work hard in the next 6 months. Okay, next is C3.
Ordinance ordering the Community and Business Development Department of the City of Winston-Salem to remove or demolish a structure unfit for human habitation and otherwise to effectuate the purpose of Chapter 10, Article 5 of the Winston-Salem City Code of repairs more than 65% of the value of the structure. Property owned by Triad Asset Management LLC located at 229 Wheeler Street.
The property at 229 Wheeler Street,
Pardon? That's not it?
It is.
Oh,
the property located at 229 Wheeler Street. We held a hearing on April the 8th of 2015 and obtained service for the hearing by certified mail. The hearing was held on May 28th of 2015. An order to repair or demolish was issued on June 11, 2015. Service on the order was achieved July 21st, 2015. And the fair market value of the structure is $28,640. The estimated cost to repair is $79,781.
okay, thank you. Are there any questions, Ms. Dempsey?
No,
Go ahead.
Committee, I would just simply ask on this item if you all would hold this in committee until next month. I'd requested some information on this property in particular, and I'd just like to get that information before we move forward with it.
We can hold this in committee, if someone would like to make that motion.
Move to hold in committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it for consent agenda. We'll move on to the general agenda. G1.
Item G1, fair housing testing update.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Light, members of the committee. We're happy to be here today in order to update you on the status of our fair housing testing program. You may recall that approximately 4 to 5 years ago, we had a fair housing testing pilot that we launched. And we worked with the Winston-Salem Regional Association of Realtors Property Management Division in order to make sure that everyone understood what fair housing testing was, and we also helped them to understand exactly how we were going to be approaching it here in our community. And at that time, we did promise that we would be pursuing testing yet again in the upcoming years. And so that time has come. It has actually passed now. So we have just completed phase 2. And this time, instead of doing the testing in-house as we did for the pilot program, what we did was we retained the services of the Fair Housing Project of Legal Aid of North Carolina out of Raleigh. And so with us today, we have Mr. Jeff Dillman. He is the co-chair of the Fair Housing Project, and he oversaw the fair housing testing process for the city of Winston-Salem that was just completed earlier this year.
Thank you. Mr. Dillman, if you'll give your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Jeff Dillman. I'm the co-director of the Fair Housing Project at Legal Aid of North Carolina, and you need my street address. I'm a resident of Durham, North Carolina. Do you need the street address, the full?
Yes, please.
502 Constitution Drive in Durham.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to come here today to inform you about the status of the fair housing testing that we've been doing for the city. The fair housing testing is used to help enforce fair housing laws, and fair housing laws, as we know, have sort of two main parts. One is to address and prevent housing discrimination, and the second is to try to promote integrated communities, integrated residential communities. So as a means of addressing discrimination, fair housing testing is used to ensure that housing providers, whether they're landlords or property managers, whether they're home sellers or other people in the housing industry, are in fact abiding by fair housing laws. The definition of testing is a means typically undercover to determine whether individuals are complying with these fair housing laws. And the reason we need to do it undercover is that currently a lot of housing discrimination is going on, is surreptitious. People no longer put up signs saying no blacks or whites only or no Jews or statements, they make statements like that. And instead they engage in discrimination in more subtle ways. Sometimes a housing provider might not mistakenly, but inaccurately inform someone that something is not available when in fact it is available, or they might quote a higher price to an individual who they don't want to rent to compared to someone in a group that they do want to rent to. And so the reason we need fair housing testing is to uncover these types of differences in treatment. In fact, it's one of the best ways to do that, because with fair housing testing, the way we did it for the city of Winston-Salem is that we did matched pair testing, where we send out two individuals who are identical in all respects except for whatever we are testing for. And we did two types of testing. We did race-based testing and national origin testing, looking at the differences between African Americans and whites for the race testing and Latinos and whites for the national origin testing. And so by matching people and then sending them at a very close time period, you can determine, are they being treated differently based on their protected class status, their race, or their national origin, or you can eliminate other potential variables for differences in treatment. Yes.
Did they go to the same place?
Oh, yes, yes. So in a typical fair housing test, we take individuals who we have trained in terms of what the methodology is. We give them a profile for what type of housing they're supposed to be looking for what type of family they're supposed to be asking for housing about. Now, they may be told they're looking for them and their spouse, or they might have a child. We give them information about what their income is, so that if they're asked about that, they can present similar income information. In fact, we typically give in a race test, we would typically give the African American individual slightly higher income, so they would be more qualified than the white individual, so that if there was a difference, it wouldn't, it should be favoring the African American, not going against the African American in that type of test. But yes, the two individuals would then approach the housing provider and ask about housing, and then record what happens to them. They are then debriefed by a testing coordinator that we have, and the testing coordinator goes over exactly what happened. If there's anything that's unclear, they interview the tester and clarify anything, and then they compare the results of what in the race test, what the white tester experienced and what the African American tester experienced, and determine, are there any differences? And because we've matched these individuals for most characteristics, family size, income, and things like that, any differences that we see should be based on race in a race-based test, or national origin in that type of test. Yes?
Another question. What about the front office person that is talking to the testers?
Right.
You try to make sure that they're talking to the same person?
Yes, yeah, we can't always control for that, and so sometimes someone might go on a break, or someone's shift might have just ended right in between the time the testers are coming. So it's not always the same, but typically they are seeing the same individual. Our position is that in a rental situation, if you have a property management company, say, that's looking at renting apartments, they should be offering the same thing, whether it's Sally or Joe showing the property. They should know, here's what we have, here's what the costs are, here's what the security deposit is, and the person should be treated the same whether they see Sally or Joe. But in most tests, they are seeing the same individual. property manager, and so that would also be a control for that as well. But the purpose of it is again to ensure that individuals are following fair housing laws, making sure that they are making the same opportunities available for housing. The housing testing that we did for the city was all rental-based testing, so we did not do any sales. It was rentals, and as I mentioned, we did 6 national origin tests and 6 race-based tests. With our contract, what we typically do in all of our testing, and we do a large amount of testing throughout the state of North Carolina, is we do follow-up testing if we see what looks like an affirmative result, because sometimes there can be sort of random differences. You know, a property manager may be rushing through something because they have to use the bathroom or their child is sick at school, and so we typically do follow-up testing to see if it continues, if it's a pattern, if it's not just one case, but it's multiple cases. Of the testing that we did for the city, of the race-based tests, 3 did not show any differences in treatment, 2 did show differences in treatment, and 1 was inconclusive. And the inconclusive ones, what typically happens with those are some things that were quoted favored the white tester and some things favored the African-American tester. The African-American tester might be told about a cheaper unit, the white tester might be told about something else that was different, and so it's hard to tell if it's completely favoring one or the other. Of the affirmative tests that we did, we are continuing to do additional testing for one of those, and we have an ongoing investigation, and I can't, because we have ongoing investigations, I can't reveal a lot more about that, and I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to hide things, but we are continuing to pursue things with that. With the other affirmative test, our follow-up testing did not show a difference in treatment the second time, and so we are not pursuing anything further with that. With regard to the national origin testing, 2 tests did not show any difference in treatment between Latinos and whites. 2 were inconclusive, and 2 did show differences, and we're continuing to do some follow-up testing on both of those ones that were affirmative for national origin. I'm happy to answer additional questions if any of you have any. As I said before, I can't give a lot of details about it because our methodology, while it is approved by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and it's a very strict protocol that we follow, we try to keep it confidential, and HUD recognizes that as well, that it needs to be kept confidential so that we can continue to do this type of important work. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you for the information. I think for some of us, we already kind of know how it plays out in the real world. The information that you provided for us in the report that we have, and the outcomes. And maybe at this time there is no or are no suggested solutions or goals, or as we say, tasks, things we need to work on as a city, more so and in partnership hopefully with the county. Because what it reflects is, like I said, for some of us, we already know, but I think it's very important for the general public to understand the perception. People think that everything is okay in the land of Oz when it's not Kansas at all, that people are still being discriminated against because of the color or the religion or the ethnicity. Again, what I'm looking for is, you told me what I'm not doing good. You said I'm 33% bad, which I was 33% bad a couple of years ago. And now that we know it's not a fluke, what is it that this city can go work on? And Ms. Abraham, that's what I'm looking for, is what is it that we can go work on to help hopefully improve this situation?
Well, I mean, I think that's something that obviously the Human Relations Department is probably, working on ideas for doing that. I see there's sort of 2 or 3 important things that you want to think about in terms of a strategy for addressing housing discrimination. One is education and outreach, because with regard to race discrimination, I mean, we all know that race discrimination is unlawful, but there are certain types of discrimination with regard to disabilities and families with children that some people aren't aware that it may be unlawful to do certain things. So I think education and outreach is a crucial component to any type of strategy. I also think enforcement, including testing and then going beyond the testing and filing cases where appropriate, is an important strategy, so that for individuals who are discriminating and have been found to discriminate, whether it's against an individual home buyer or person renting it or through testing, that those individuals are held accountable. That the people who are engaging in unlawful behavior know that there is a price to pay for that unlawful behavior. So I think an enforcement strategy, including testing and potentially litigation, is an important part of that. Not in Winston-Salem, but Legal Aid has brought a number of cases with regard to our fair housing testing, and have wound up entering into agreements with apartment complexes to adopt policies to deal with people with disabilities so that they can comply with the law, and to adopt other procedures to ensure that they're complying with the Fair Housing Act. So I think enforcement is important. And then I also think looking at what HUD has made a priority recently, which is affirmatively furthering fair housing and ensuring that city policies and procedures, whether it's zoning, whether it's where CDBG funds are used, but all of those resources are done in a way that promotes integration and healthy, diverse communities, and don't benefit certain communities at the expense of other ones.
One more comment, Madam Chair. One of the things that I guess I won't say we're struggling with here in Winston, but other urban areas as well when it comes to affordable housing or workforce housing, and where do we put it with all of this new development, and hoping that the partners or people that come to us for collaboration understand that we just, again, can't, discrimination is more than just rental. It's economic discrimination. You know, if you don't look like me, if your income is less than what I want, then I don't want you living in my neighborhood or my building. So I see this, Ms. Abraham and City Attorney, City Assistant Manager Page, and the City Manager. Again, I see part of our corrective action is that we start to look at, again, how we're going forward with these projects that we are being inundated with to build housing for people who can afford to pay anywhere from $1,000+ a month versus people who can only pay $200 to $300 with assistance of some type. So I see that as one of the things that we could probably do. What do you think? Do you think that's one of the things that we could also put in our corrective action plan?
I mean, I think the interaction of affordable housing and fair housing is a very important component. I mean, they interrelate in certain ways, although there are separate issues. And so, you know, having affordable housing and ensuring that individuals who use subsidized housing are afforded opportunities to live in different types of communities is important, and is something that HUD has indicated that they're going to be looking at much more closely than they have in the past. And so I think that you do want to look at how that interacts with the fair housing strategy.
Thank you.
I'd like to just echo Councilmember Adams' latter comments in reference to the portions of workforce and affordable housing and how we integrate those processes. We've been having a lot of conversation about that as of late. But one question I do have is, particularly you stated that in this there was not anything related to actual purchasing, and that was not tested. Why was that portion not tested?
That was all we had discussed for this initial testing contract, and we do sales testing, we do other types of testing as well, and that's something that if the city would like to think about in the future, we would be happy to work together on something like that.
I know that they're, as it stands now, renting, and more people are renting than they are buying, but I think it would be very interesting for us to be able to understand and take a look at what that looks like in our community as well. I don't know what the committee thinks, but I do believe that that is a portion that we need to have data on to be able to reflect on it.
I've been a landlord for about 35 years, and I have no doubt there's a significant amount of poor treatment. But I do have to wonder about a sample size of 6 to draw a great conclusion from a sample size of 6, because within that 6, how many of them were realtors? And if there are realtors, that's a whole sort of set-aside issue. Right. I think is somewhat easier to tackle. Are we dealing with apartment complex owners? Because if you are, that's sort of a broader base that has more of an impact. So how much color can we get out of 6?
I wouldn't make huge conclusions that this is the incidence of housing discrimination in the Winston-Salem rental market based on these tests solely. I would agree. I mean, we did not do a sort of a random selection for, of all possible rental units in constructing the tests, and so I wouldn't draw it based on that. The only other thing I guess I would point out is that the type of testing that we do, we actually our testers don't go through with the transaction, so they stop it at a certain point, and so sometimes there's discrimination that's occurring later on that we aren't able to uncover. So I mean, but it could be a little bit higher, it could be lower. There's not a.
It makes it more difficult for us to deal with it if we don't know within that date,
Right.
because it's not up to date.
Yeah, I'm now,
And I was chair of the Cultural Diversity Committee at our local realtors group, and I think our realtors group is very forward-looking, and there's a lot of training that goes on. But if it's not working, that would be great feedback to be able to feed back to the realtors and say, you know, we gotta try something different than what we've been doing because of the results.
My law's a little rusty in this area. Is there an administrative complaint process, or is it straightforward?
There's both that are under the Fair Housing Act. So under the federal law, you can bring a case in federal court or state court, or you could also bring an administrative complaint. That could be done either with HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or City of Winston-Salem is a FAP agency. It's a Fair Housing Assistance Program, and so administrative complaints can be filed with the city, and then the city would actually investigate those and attempt to resolve those complaints. And Ms. Abraha here is the head of the city agency that handles that.
Who has standing to litigate? Clearly, an individual is discriminated against us. But are there any institutional avenues?
Standing would, for legal standing, would cover both individuals who are discriminated against. It includes testers have standing. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that they do have standing, as well as fair housing organizations such as ours that engage in testing would also have standing.
Would city agency have standing? Involved in testing?
Potentially, yes. I mean, typically, in the administrative complaint process, typically the way it works is an individual or a tester or a fair housing organization would file an administrative complaint, and an initial determination is made about whether it's probable that discrimination occurred or not, and then that administrative agency would bring a case before either an administrative law judge or in court to enforce the rights. So HUD winds up on the federal level bringing cases against landlords and other people in the industry that engage in discrimination, even though HUD isn't, there was an underlying complainant under that complaint.
And Councilmember Bessie, in that situation, in that situation, we would typically defer to HUD because it would probably end up being a HUD-initiated complaint from the Secretary of HUD. That's typically how it's laid out. It would be unlikely, and Angela, please do chime in, it would be unlikely that we would be the ones to be a party to something like that unless it has been caused. If we find that there's a cause to believe that discrimination has occurred, then it becomes the City of Winston-Salem versus whomever. But when we're talking about whether or not we would have standing just as the original party, that would be one where we would probably defer to HUD, and HUD would initiate what's called a secretary-based complaint.
The only thing I would add to that is that we do have a local process with the Human Relations Commission. If the complainant, after cause has been found, elects to go to the administrative process, the commission conducts the hearing. If they decide they want to go to court, then my office will file a fair housing complaint in the name of the city on behalf of the complaint. So we've got a
one other line of inquiry then. In addition to the purchase-based testing, I know that the area of gender-based discrimination is in development over the last couple of years, particularly the application of gender-based discrimination to sexual orientation couples applying to rent or purchase being discriminated against. I'd be interested in that being incorporated in the testing program going forward as well.
Thank you.
Opens up a lot of questions and stuff. Are there any other questions for Mr. Dillon? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very interesting, very interesting. G2.
Item G2, Building Integrated Communities Assessment.
Hello again. Hello. At this time, I would like to introduce to you Ms. Hannah Gill from UNC Chapel Hill and Ms. Jessica Lee White, also from UNC Chapel Hill. These ladies are working with us on our BIC, or Building Integrated Communities project. And as you will recall, we were awarded the grant from UNC Chapel Hill last year to work with this staff for approximately 3 years. And the overall purpose of the grant is to integrate our local immigrant community more so into mainstream things here in Winston-Salem. So when we're talking about city services provided by local agencies and so on and so forth, we're wanting to make sure that language barriers and cultural differences are not precluding these folks from being able to access services as freely as others do. And so we have just completed a needs assessment report working with UNC Chapel Hill, and they have already released the report. They've done a press release. You all have probably seen at least the link to the report. The full report is available on our website as well as theirs. And also, we have done a lot of work in the community in actually talking directly with service agency providers as well as the immigrant population from various countries and origins from around the world. And so now today they just want to give you a status update and entertain any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairwoman Light and members of the committee members. My name is Hannah Gill, and need to state my address, is that correct? I hail from Saxapaw, North Carolina. It's 1503 Morris Chapel Cemetery Road, Saxapaw, North Carolina. All right, well, we appreciate the opportunity to tell you about the work that we're doing. And I will start by explaining what is Building Integrated Communities. Well, it's a statewide initiative that helps North Carolina local governments successfully engage with immigrants and refugee populations in order to improve public safety, promote economic development, enhance communication, and also improve relationships. So as a result of working with Building Integrated Communities, local governments and diverse community stakeholders have the tools to generate locally relevant strategies that strengthen immigrant civic engagement, linguistic achievement, and economic and educational advancement. The process of building integrated communities is really driven by community partners who define their goals and priorities and who are responsible for the eventual implementation of these integration strategies. Local officials and the big team, commit 3 years to ensuring that these strategies are implemented. Our process begins with research. We assess our community resources and our needs. Then we come together and we assemble a diverse group of stakeholders for public meetings. Thirdly, we strategize. We create strategies and action plans to address integration barriers. We act by implementing our strategies. And finally, we measure how effective our strategies are. So we evaluate our action plans and their implementation. So why is this important in Winston-Salem? Well, an estimated 32,178 Forsyth County residents are foreign-born. About 80% of a little over 25,000 of those foreign-born residents live within the city of Winston-Salem. Foreign-born residents make up about an estimated 11% of the city's total population. Now, to give a quick timeline, in Winston-Salem, Building Integrated Communities received a grant in the spring of 2014. The Winston-Salem Human Relations Department applied for a grant with the Building Integrated Communities program. And then in May 2014, Winston-Salem was selected by UNC as one of 2 North Carolina municipal partners for 2014 to 2017. And this is funded by the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jessica Lee White.
Chairwoman Light, committee members. Jessica Lee White of 2112 Summit Street in Durham. And I think this was mentioned, a researcher and coordinator with the BIC program at UNC. Since Winston-Salem won that BIC grant, Winston-Salem Building Integrated Communities has accomplished a lot in the first of its 3 years here. One of the first things that happened is that Director of Human Relations, Wanda here, gathered together a stakeholder committee of different key organizations, and immediately after that we began the very important first phase of data collection and assessment to understand the makeup of foreign-born communities here in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, as well as the major issues affecting those communities and current and potential efforts to improve immigrant integration in the area. So some of that important information that was collected, and which is in the full report published online. Actually, I'll note too that everything was collected through what we call a participatory community assessment process. So led by and directed by organizations and members of the community here. Some of that data includes demographic data, GIS, Geographic Information Systems data visualization and comparison, which was actually facilitated by Strategic Planning Services here, Lynn Rusher, with the city, and data from a survey of local organizations, as well as a review of existing reports and information that we already have about about foreign-born communities in the area. The committee also gathered more than 200 paper and electronic surveys in both English and Spanish that were completed by local residents of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County from 23 countries of origin, as well as Puerto Rico. The committee held 2 public meetings with local residents, where about 200 residents participated in 6 different discussion groups to talk about the major challenges, their perspectives and experiences with respect to the major challenges to foreign-born communities here and integration in the area. And I will note, I know someone here was talking about sample size earlier, yes, Council. So I know it's not going over heads, that we know this is not a representative sample, as it would not be feasible to randomly sample from the entire foreign-born population here. We do know actually that it was a very diverse sample, and so in terms of qualitative methods, of non-statistically representative methods, it was really useful in ensuring that we had participants with all different sorts of characteristics in terms of family origin, country of origin, language spoken, age, gender, all of these things. And so the full assessment report with all of that information is publicly available in English and Spanish, forthcoming this week at the website on your slide. And I'll note, just from among everything, it contains the findings from the surveys, discussion groups, the surveys of organizations. At the beginning, there is also a 4-page executive summary, which you might find most useful as it highlights and sort of contextualizes the major issues that were identified both by residents through the paper and electronic surveys, as well as by the majority of resident discussion groups. So we had a really clear idea of top issues and issues to address, and we were able to contextualize those in the executive summary using all of the other sorts of data from the report, demographics, school economic data, things like that. And now in this second year of the program and into the 3rd year, what's going to be happening is that the Winston-Salem BIC Stakeholder Committee is chairing 6 subcommittees to address different issues that were identified in the assessment report. Those subcommittees will each be headed by a member of the BIC committee, so members who are from the various stakeholder key organizations who were invited and have been participating from the very beginning. They will be chairing those subcommittees and inviting residents to participate in those subcommittees so that they can contribute their ideas, their talents, their skills in developing strategies to address the issues identified, and also to actually implementing plans in the future. The committee, after sort of brainstorming and developing a range of potential strategies, will then be examining the feasibility of implementing those different strategies and comparing that to examples of best practices addressing similar issues in other communities throughout the country. Next, the committee will be finalizing an overall plan of action, and then the committee, residents, and city, Winston-Salem and Forsyth County will be implementing that plan in the 3rd year of the program. At that same time, during the 3rd year, Hannah and I at UNC, along with any other staff that we find relevant to helping to develop the appropriate evaluation plans, are going to create tools to measure and document the impact of these strategies on the community and on local integration efforts. And so this is just a final snapshot right here because we do think pictures tell a lot. And this snapshot is from one of the Winston-Salem Vic public meetings with residents. I think this one was April 30th at Goodwill Industries. So we'd love to hear any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much for your participation in helping to make this happen, as well as Ms. Abraham. As a person that's born and raised here in Winston-Salem, and we're also discussing this at a state level with the League of Municipalities Board, the changing of the diversity and ethnicity of North Carolina has been going on for some while now, but it's really now escalated, or we're into this jump forward mode more so than a lot of states in the country. Our climate, our environment, our small towns, whatever, schools are bringing lots of people here to live. One of the things that I find out as a resident of Winston-Salem, and I've been saying this since it's all started to happen, we don't talk to each other. And we don't have a conduit or anyone to talk to us together because we don't understand the language or the culture. And our new citizens don't understand our language or our culture. We have expectations that nobody seems to want to communicate to the new neighbors or citizens or residents. And also back and forth, they have expectations of us. And so we're in this gray area right now, whereas we know we all exist. I like what I'm seeing, but I really would like, I think it's communication is the key. We can have interpreters and we can present data, but unless you put me in a room with some of my new citizens and residents and neighbors, and we can look at each other FaceTime, and someone can communicate or help us to communicate with each other, I think we're going to have this disconnect, and it's going to hurt us as we move forward, and we're seeing that in the state already, listening to small towns that are not urban centers. So how do you expect or how to help us with this study in building an integrated community? How do we get someone to help us just talk to each other? Maybe I don't know Spanish that well. I used to know it when I was in high school and college, but because I had no one to talk to, I lost it. So how do we get that back? What is your suggestion to get that back?
Well, I think those are really important points. I really appreciate that you brought them up. And the process that we go through, relationship building is a critical part of that. So all of us that are involved in public meetings and the monthly meetings with our committee, these are times where we build relationships between community residents and folks that work within the city or nonprofit organizations. So we're really excited that a lot of those relationships that are formed throughout this 3-year process lead to really fruitful leadership opportunities later on for many of the community folks that are participating in our process. But to go beyond that, to give you an idea of what some other cities we've worked with have done, High Point, for example, we worked with High Point for 3 years, and they created a 16-point action plan, which had as one of its major emphases was cultural competence. And one of the key activities that they began as a result of all of this process was they created transportation. Access to transportation was one of the major issues. And so they created a program in which local officials, folks who work within the transportation department, first responders, police, and fire department officials would meet on a regular basis with delegations of immigrant and refugee residents, and spend a day learning about, what are the different services that the city offers, and how can we better communicate with each other. And these sorts of ongoing programming is just one example of ways that we hope to build relationships, sustainable long-term relationships. There are 15 other examples of things that they did that may address that as well, hopefully do.
Thank you.
If I can add on to that, I think even though the big committee has just sort of decided how to approach that they're going to have 6 subcommittees, and so we're just at the very start of creating these plans, there's been
so much energy and work already by everyone. And I'm going to this because, where is that picture? Yeah, this first picture right here. I know that the trust talks that Human Relations has already been holding in conjunction with the police department. They sort of immediately after we all had the assessment information, but it wasn't necessarily it wasn't online in that report form yet, but nobody was waiting. And the next trust talks was for newcomers. It was a newcomers trust talks, and this picture it kind of makes me think about what you're talking about, because it's members of the police department with immigrant and foreign-born community members there in the room, talking about their interactions, expectations.
First of all, I want to say the number of different nationalities represented here is kind of staggering. I mean, I view it as a positive that we have all this diversity going on in the community. And I think one of the things that I know Councilmember Adams and I are focused on is community development through food. And I think there are lots of opportunities to, as a strategy, let's try to explore bringing people into the mainstream through commerce. If you are able to sell your food, I was down at the International Village celebration on Saturday at Scorpion Plaza, and one of the booths there, I've got an empanada, and the older person in the booth could not speak English, but the 12-year-old could do commerce. So that is something I think benefits us from a tourism standpoint, from a local food production standpoint, from a job standpoint. And I don't know exactly how you put that into place, but it seems like that's an opportunity to make things work.
I think, I know they have committee members who are here too.
Are any of the, would the committee members who are here stand up and let us thank you? No?
Drea Parker, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Drea Parker with Compassion.
Councilmember Best.
Thank you. Can you get us information on what the subcommittees are and membership and opportunities for involvement by other interested community members? And is there a process during the evaluation period for you to add other interested community members? Somebody comes forward and says, you know, I work in transportation and I'd like to help.
Definitely.
If
Definitely.
you can get us that information.
Yeah, we would love more participation and more involvement from anyone who's a stakeholder interested.
And what is being talked about right now too is also sort of at the launching of the subcommittees, holding a press release. We already have a lot of contacts actually of the residents who participated in the public meetings, so we sort of have a lot of resident contacts in that way of folks who have already been engaged and are looking forward to hearing about how they can plug back in with the actual work towards solutions. So we have those sort of routes of reaching people and bringing people back into the process now that it's sort of folded into a report and we're opening back up again. And yes, through a press release so far, a public event, our idea so far of making sure that we're working as much. And there are a number of organizations. We wanted to keep the presentation brief, but the committee itself represents Wanda did a fabulous job reaching out to folks for this. It really represents a wide variety of organizations and also in terms of cultural, racial, and religious variety organizations who are involved. So we have, that was part of the key to success in getting such a diverse survey sample. So
One of the things that you learn in local government is you can do a saturation media campaign for 2 months, and as soon as that stops and you release your results and whatever you're working on, the first thing you hear is a half dozen different people in the neighborhood you represent will call and say, why didn't I hear about this?
Yeah.
It's helpful to have an opportunity to plug people in who are just hearing about it.
And the outreach material, everything that we've done in terms of media and outreach has been in both Spanish and English. There are hundreds of languages spoken in the area. What we've tried to do so far is in terms of making sure that English is available, and then when it comes to actual in-person participation in meetings, making sure that folks know if they'd like an interpreter for a different language to let us know ahead.
Well, thank you all very, very much. Wanda, did you want to add anything?
No, I think they've said it all.
That's wonderful.
I think
Yes,
they
thank
have.
you so much for the work you're doing. We have G3.
Item G3, Human Relations Commission Annual Report.
This is your day.
Hello, I know,
Your
this is
day.
our day, right? Thank you so much.
The Abraham Day.
May we have your name and address, please?
Wanda Allen Abraha, here at City Hall.
Abraham Day.
I have with me today the Chair of the Human Relations Commission, newly retired Principal of Jefferson Elementary School, Ms. Nora Baker. And I also have another member of the Winston-Salem Human Relations Commission who is an esteemed attorney here with Womble Carlisle, Ms. Sunny Haynes. And so they are going to do a very brief overview of the Human Relations Annual Report for 2014-15. And quite frankly, you've already heard a lot of what Human Relations has been doing through BIC and also through the Fair Housing Project, but they're just going to touch on a few more highlights. Thank you.
Good evening, Councilwoman Light, council members. I'm Nora Baker, and my address is 411 Burkridge Court, zip code 27104. When I was writing down everything that we've done this year, it was a very long list. We are a working board. We have done several things this year. One thing is a March for Homeless Children to bring awareness about the homeless issue in Winston-Salem. We have had several partnerships. One was with Old Salem with the Created Equal series. That was in January and February of this year. I personally went to a couple of them, Slavery by Another Name, and then The Darling Story, if you're familiar with that. We have race relations, Student Race Relations Forum. This year we had it at Forsyth Country Day School, and then had a follow-up with students. And that is, we have students from every school in the district and all our private schools. They come and they talk about race relations in their schools and what issues come about and how they're trying to solve those issues in their schools. We also have had several trust talks. I know the ladies from BIC talked about one of them, which is our newcomers trust talk. And one thing we'll say is that sometimes we have trust talks as a result of something that happened. For example, when we had Ferguson happening, there were all these questions about what's going on in Winston-Salem. And so we had a trust talk with the police department and several other people to talk about that. We also wanted to bring in this year a lot of the colleges. So we had trust talks at Salem College, Wake Forest, and Winston-Salem State. And we had several students from each of those colleges come in and talk with us about what's going on their campus. We also had their campus police along with the Winston-Salem Police Department to talk about any issues that were there. Another thing is that we bring in and try to involve the youth in our community. We have the Youth Advisory Committee, which are students from the high school as well as the College Advisory Committee. We also, as we talked about the testing for fair housing, we have processed over 550 complaints through our investigators through this Human Relations Commission. And the last thing I'll talk about is that I have a question about Hinduism, and that was as a result of what happened with the announcement of building a temple. We had a question about that, where we actually had a very robust conversation about what Hinduism is and what it means to people. And now, Commissioner Haynes.
Good evening, Chairwoman Light, council members. My name is Sunny Haynes, 2930 Stonekirk Court, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27103. I wanted to add before we begin that to Councilwoman Adams' very critical point about fostering conversations with citizens in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. We are very purposeful about having events that do bring all kinds of voices in our community to the table, not only to have informational and educational programs and also programs that align with our fair housing mandate, but also to have those events where people can sit down with people who are not like them and have that conversation. So to that end, you've heard about building integrated communities and our partnership that we are working on there. We celebrated fair housing this month in April. We had a kickoff event with regional realtors and also others from local government, and then that culminated in our Fair Housing Summit that we had on April 23rd. We have also had several events that are really about celebrating different cultures in our community. So we were a sponsor of the Juneteenth Festival. We also worked with Fiesta, or will be working with Fiesta, International Village, as Councilmember McIntosh mentioned. And we also at International Village partnered so that people could have a shuttle back and forth from Bookmarks, the Festival of Books, to International Village as well. We celebrated 2 individuals who are making outstanding strides in our community to promote inclusiveness and diversity, and we did that with our Martin Luther King Young Dreamers Award in celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. Day this year. We also had the Human Relations Commission Student Awards Banquet, where we had over 600 people in attendance and honored students from elementary school all the way up to high school who are promoting inclusiveness in our community and also fostering positive race relations. Finally, we had the Showcase of Song, which was to celebrate Black History Month and to really have a great event where people could celebrate song and celebrate the origins of Black history in this country and really promote the idea that Black history is truly American history and that it is something that everyone should be aware of. So those were some of our events. As Chairwoman Baker said, we have definitely had a busy year and we are a working commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very impressive. Is there, do you have, yes, Councilmember Bessie?
Do we have a statistical analysis available of the complaints investigated housing?
Yes, we can get that to you. We have it broken down through our annual report, and so we can get that to you. Yes, yes, we have lots of them.
I'll also mention that we have been working diligently on proposed language for amending the Fair Housing Ordinance to promote inclusiveness with people who have decided to be in relationships that maybe some do not consider traditional, but that we consider important and worthy of protection under our Fair Housing Ordinance.
And it has been great to have 2 attorneys on the commission to hammer out that language for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Always well spoken.
Yeah, right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Impressive work. G4.
Presentation on the East Northeast Area Plan Update. Scheduled for public hearing on October the 5th, 2015.
Mr. Andrade.
I'm here. Good afternoon, or good evening. Yeah, I'd like to update you on the work that staff has completed to date on the East Northeast Area Plan. And as you know, as was mentioned, the public hearing is scheduled for October 5th, and the Planning Board recommended approval at the public hearing. This is the 3rd area plan that we completed last fiscal year. It's the East Northeast Area Plan is highlighted in red on the map. We did have, as with all the area plans, extensive community participation, 3 community meetings, and 1 drop-in session. We had a very good kickoff meeting. About 45 people attended. So on average, we have probably 25 people, which is a very good number of participants for an extended program like this one. What we heard from the kickoff meeting, just as some of us know, it's really an area that does miss or has a lack of businesses, sit-down restaurants. There are some areas that really need some additional businesses. And what we heard over and over and over was this idea of developing services closer to where people live. And so that was probably the main area that we discussed quite in detail. Compatible design between the existing and the proposed new development, and the fact that there is enough labor force to serve additional businesses that may come to the area. And lastly, the preservation of open space was another big issue. So we took that into consideration, and of course, this is an update of the 2008 plan. So we look at what worked, what didn't work, new plans that were coming that we were aware of. And so we developed the plan, and it relies heavily on mixed use, as was not the case in the 2008 plan. So this proposed land use map is basically building upon the existing development pattern. It is pretty clear a development pattern in this particular area, where you have on the north the airport, Brookwood Industrial Drive, Brookwood Industrial Business Park, I'm sorry. And then you have Lowry Street Business Park. Those are the ones providing industrial development. But you have in the map in the yellow, that's a very large area towards the middle that is single family mixed in with some duplex and multifamily. So that is the residential core. And so what the proposed land use shows are additional services located on the periphery pretty much of that residential area, trying to be as close as possible to provide some of the needed businesses there. And as you all know, the concept of activity centers here is showing a number of those where those services could be provided close to the residents. And they're basically following the main roads here, Glen Avenue, Liberty Street, Martin Luther King Jr. Drive here, New Walkertown Road, and Old Greensboro Road. Those are the main roads in the area, and that's where having this type of development in pretty much existing nodes, makes a lot of sense, just building up on those existing nodes and providing additional needed services. As I said, a new concept or a concept that was not included in the previous area plan was as extensively as this one is the mixed use. And there are a number of mixed use areas. I will talk about a few of those where there is a commercial component. Now, let me just briefly give you a couple examples of some of the work that was completed, particularly on the East Winston Activity Center. Some of this was included partially on the previous plan, but in between the two plans, additional ideas have come up. So this 2015 plan includes those ideas, and that is along Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, as well as the area that is on the east side of US 52 between 2nd and 5th Streets. So for Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, you'll know we have a streetscape improvements coming up. It's a major landscape and fencing, and it includes a lot of public art. So that it's going to change the appearance of that area. We also have an overlay district that was approved. And then we have the upcoming Business 40 closure. So this area is going to receive a lot of additional traffic, and so the area plan recommends more commercial development on the west side of the street. And since there is already an overlay district, this kind of shows a potential redevelopment with the buildings pulled up to the street, the parking to the rear, which is the urban form that the overlay district calls for. That's just in a sketch of what may happen with the fencing and the historic markers, the crosswalks that are proposed to be included very soon.
Can I step in?
Yes.
The overlay district, is that a form-based code? That's the overlay district?
Yes, it does have some basic standards, setbacks, location of parking, window treatment, signage. Yeah. It is not exactly, it's pretty close to the downtown overlay district. But, this is an idea that was developed maybe 2-3 years ago, but because of the proximity of this particular area between 2nd, 5th, US 52 and Cleveland Avenue to the Innovation Quarter, it does make sense to eventually have a redevelopment of this area with the potential to serve some of the additional needs for the Innovation Quarter. And I know Councilmember Montgomery, we gave him the concept generally, and I know there's been some discussions, but generally calling for rearranging the sites for the churches and adding multifamily, hopefully some commercial. In terms of the mixed-use areas, there are a couple of those that I really like to emphasize. There are a number of those that are proposed that were not in the previous plan, but really the Area A, which is the Cleveland Avenue Neighborhood Transformation Plan, currently being done by the Housing Authority, and Lakeside Apartments, which is a private development. You all remember that the Housing Authority did a master plan maybe in 2010. It was called the Cleveland Avenue Initiative, but now there is a plan much more in depth, looking at the northern section, which it's from 14 to 21st and 52 to Donnelly Avenue. We have had a number of meetings with the community, with the Housing Authority, with Neighbors for Better Neighborhoods, or with the consultant Renaissance Group in developing a master plan for this. So we're excited that the master plan is going to be made public, the draft form in a couple days, next Thursday. So the area plan just recognizes that. Again, we work very closely with all of them, but the idea is to have an interconnected system of roads here with a mixture of mixed use and mixed income housing that may include elderly housing, apartments, townhouses, market rate housing, and some economic development opportunities along Liberty Street. It also includes a public school and a park. So that's one, and you'll hear more about it as the plan comes forward to be endorsed by the City Council. And the second one, it's a private development. It's for Lakeside Apartments. We have worked with them for about a year, different options, different possibilities, but it really, the latest concept calls out for building an urban village with a commercial core and with residential apartments and townhouses around it, all connected by sidewalks and pedestrian bicycle facilities. Now, my understanding is that it's going to be presented to the community next month by the end of October, and maybe it will come to the request for rezoning in November. But this is basically a game-changing plan. It's something that we haven't seen here, and it is quite amazing. You'll see about it. Now, other sections of the plan, as we all include, transportation recommendations. There is not much in terms of that in this plan, but Reedsville Road, bond money, it's really going to have an impact, not only with new bicycle lanes and projected bicycle lanes, with new sidewalks, generally in the area that is not covered with sidewalks along all Greensboro Road, as well as the community facilities. There are a number of projects underway. The first 5 parks, Winston Lake to Rupert Bell, they all will have some new aquatic facilities or spray ground, so all of that, it's really going to change the overall quality of the recreational facilities here. Proposed greenway towards the bottom, this is the one that is going to connect the Brushy Fork Creek to the Salem Creek, so that will create a really good connection between these two important greenways, and there's some other planned throughout the area. I think the importance will be the possible extension on whenever the first phase is built on the rails and trails on Innovation Quarter. That will really provide an access to the area to Innovation Quarter. And lastly, I don't want to expand too much on historic resources. You have seen the architectural survey and all the presentation, but this area has a very deep, a very good number of historic resources. We talked about them through the area process, and we highlighted the main ones in the area plan. I gave you a very quick overview. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
The Reedsville Road, there's always been the rumor around that the state was going to widen that road, that it's a main emergency route or something like that. How does that fit in with the prospect of sidewalks and whatever?
What we do typically in the area plans is we take the recommendations from the transportation department related to that. Oops, I broke my glasses.
Oh dear.
And I think what's proposed on the Reedsville Road, it's 4-lane divided with depressed median and shoulders. So yeah, when you have a 4-lane highway divided, it's a little more difficult to include that. Now, I do not know exactly what the cross section for that particular road, and it's supposed to be a long-term. So, yeah.
I think Old Greensboro Road would probably be the better road that would be pedestrian friendly, sidewalk. It's on sidewalks in that area, and it runs roughly parallel.
Yeah, it does, yeah. Are there any questions for Marco? Yes.
Particularly on Old Greensboro Road, on the property there, the Delta property, that still remains here with the same kind of site plan, the same kind of information, although I know that those plans have changed as it stands now, and they're actually looking at some different options. Have we had dialogue with them around that?
Just a rumor. We have not been approached. We understand that the property may have been sold. We don't know for sure. Nothing has been come forward to us yet for that. So I think what we're trying to do is just showing the area plan the possibility of a mixed use, whether it's a conference center or not, but just with the language opening to, maybe have some commercial development along Old Greensboro Road, maybe having some mixed housing types, all connected, pedestrian connections, that type of thing. It's what it is, but yeah, we haven't heard anything yet.
And I may be the last to have learned this, but I was unaware we were looking at doing something at Lakeside. When are you anticipating the council getting more information on that?
Like I said, I talked today with the landscape architect. They're looking at the end of October to have a community meeting.
Okay.
I've been going through the area plan process, telling them, there's a plan. I'd love to show it to you, but there's not been a community meeting before, so I could share that with them. They had to change things around because of the airport runway protection area. So, they had a master plan, and they had to revise it to include that. So end of October is what I was told for the community meeting. Then they'll submit the rezoning. It has to be rezoned because it is mixed use. It's going to include some commercial development and different densities for housing. And so they're hoping to do it in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
Marco, there was a lot of conversation here about mixed-use development. I didn't see anything related to transit-oriented development, because it seems like if we're going to get more bang for our buck and sort of contain sprawl, we need to find ways to get people to their jobs without getting in their car. Any sense of how we inject that into the development process, how we get people excited about that?
Mm-hmm. What we've done, and I didn't present it to you, it's, Legacy have this concept about growth corridors, and we have identified different kinds of categories of growth corridors. And so it is included in map 8, where we have MLK, and we have Liberty Street, and we have a portion of New Walkertown Road as, I'll tell you what page it is. It's on page 54. And so we have the ones in pink. Those are the commercial office multifamily with urban form. So the intent there is, as it redevelops, to have the buildings closer to the street and sidewalks and that sort of thing. The blue one, it's more suburban, mixed urban and suburban. So what we've done through all the area plans is we are classifying the main corridors that were identified in legacy and giving them a category. So when we complete all the area plans, if it's the wishes of the board to look at the overlay zoning districts, or if it's, there are many different possibilities, but at least we have identified them and the sort of form that will be most appropriate for them. As redevelopment happens, then, you can start going along those proposed urban forms or suburban.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
For the presentation. And we're just 4 minutes over. So, if there is nothing else, we'll let Public Works take over.
We're at 6:03, Public Works will begin at 6:10.